empty shelves at retail stores, waiting 3 days for a break to fill, or driving across town to find out your hobby shop closed at 4 when you always have a card show in your pocket. With Loop, you can instantly buy cards, packs, boxes, or into auctions with the click of a button, and do it all while chatting with some of the best personalities and the best community in the hobby. Download the Loop app now on iOS or Android. Loop, a card show in your pocket.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Fish Stripes Live, presented by Loop. That's Loupe. We are all here together to preview the Marlins series up against the first place Houston Astros. Will be sure be a lot to talk about in that series. I'm joined today by the usual suspects, Isaac Azout, Alex Carver, Eli Sussman, and we are here joined by Alex Kerchuk and from Marlins Maniac, Neil Raymond. Guys, have everybody here tonight.
Happy to be here.
The first topic I want to talk about is the Nats series. Happened, of course, last few years, sweeping the Nationals, having a much needed win for the Marlins, beating them 3-0 in that sweep, having a masterclass performance by Sandy Alcantara. I'll start with Isaac. What did you see from that performance, and what else did we expect from Sandy but that performance?
Yeah, I mean, Christina asked a good question post game. It's just like it's sort of like you're playing MLB The Show on easy mode, and when Sandy Alcantara pitches against the Nationals, it really is sort of on beginner difficulty for him. But I think the thing to take away from that series was just Trevor sort of getting back on track against a okay offense, but he's looking at the velocity was there, the location was there, the fastball location was there, pumping 98 a couple of times. So I think that's the main thing that stood out to me. Strasburg, unfortunately, it was tough to see him, someone that's just so highly touted and such a phenomenal pitcher, just it's not himself in that third game. And Edward looked good as well. So overall, it was an all positive series on the field for the Marlins.
Yeah, and it's just the second time this year that they've swept anybody, and both times they swept the Nationals, which I think that speaks a lot more about the Nationals than it does about the Marlins, the way that is played out that way. The first game was super convincing, and honestly, the last game was pretty convincing as well. The one in the middle is the one that almost made us tear our hair out. I mean, that could have been one of the more agonizing losses of the year if it went the wrong way or another. Not a series that really changed much of anything in the way I feel about the team, but obviously it lifts up a lot of people's spirits to string together those wins, and it's the second longest winning streak of the season now for the team, because the other sweep was in the middle of that 7-game streak. This is the only other time they've won 3 games in a row this entire season. Yeah.
Wow. Neil, what did you think about that series from Miami, and especially like we mentioned that second game where it went to extras and we had Willian Astudillo, running his entire heart out in the end to win that game for Miami?
I think it was a very, very important series because there's still a chance for that. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I think there's still a chance for the third wild card spot. And we just really needed to get as many wins as possible. And against a team like Washington, like a sweep is just perfect. Because if you lose, you lose one game, it's just one game. Yeah, but like when you play against such a weak team, you have to get everything out of it. Because especially now, the record is 25-30, but we just needed those wins, and it was perfect. I thought it was perfect to get that win. I think it also builds momentum when you win such a close game and then you sweep. I think it's very important. The momentum is really important here.
We should shout out that Noah attended all 3 games as press. He had been 1-8 in the press box this season, and he'd won 3 straight during this series. And just for anybody that isn't familiar, Neil is now the site expert at Marlin Maniac. Just an example of this kind of stuff that he covers, the variety of topics that he does over part of that fan-sided family. So be sure to check out his stuff. He's pretty consistent and
Thank you very much.
Big variety of stuff. So we're glad to have him on, and we're glad to have that site up and running because it complements our coverage very well.
Yeah. Really quick to Noah, 4-8, those 4 wins all against the Nationals. So Still 0-8.
That's right. That's right. The first one also came against the Nats. That's a good point.
I think we'll be remiss if we didn't at least mention or touch upon everything going on with the Marlins, especially before that Nats series, the 90-minute meeting that was called upon, and everything going on. So, just what do you guys think about this entire situation? Is it even a situation? There's something to even talk about. Just what do you guys think about everything going on with the Marlins right now?
So more and more it came out that it appears that one or two players, a handful at most, were talking about Jazz Chisholm behind his back, among a bunch of other things that they had to get out in the open. But one of the biggest things that seemed to rile Twitter up was that people were talking about Jazz behind his back, and it seems like Don Mattingly wanted to get all that out in the open. And if that is the case, and if that is accurate, I actually respect that a lot. It's interesting watching everyone try to figure out who the veterans were that don't approve of the way that he shows up to the stadium. I would love to know who made the Dennis Rodman comment. And it's one of those things. It's funny. Dennis Rodman won rings, so I don't understand exactly what the issue would be with Jazz showing up in whatever he wants to show up in.
So it definitely is a topic, Daniel. It's something that shouldn't happen in the middle of a season to have your most marketable star player on the team. And Kim Ng was in the locker room during this, which was very interesting to me. I posted on Twitter today. She's in the locker room during this meeting, apparently watching her star player get criticized for, how he shows up to the park, what he does, the way that he handles himself, which, we don't know everything. We do know a couple things. I can tell you that, Jazz is Jazz, and he's going to be who he is. He's never going to be anybody else but himself. He said that himself. I can tell you that I know that he shows up to the ballpark late sometimes. He shows up wearing whatever the hell he wants, stuff like some of these old time guys, they don't like it. So they look at that and they see this guy as a guy that is undisciplined. Is that true? I honestly don't think it's necessarily like the biggest deal in the world, but apparently some of this locker room did. And as we know from reports that have come out, like Miguel Rojas was the main culprit here. Like he was going after him, and other veterans as well, probably, as Alex said. So yeah, I mean, it's a situation, and the fact that Kim Ng is sitting there listening to it is interesting to me for sure. Yeah, but I mean, man, like I said, this is the most marketable guy on this team. They have giveaways of his blue hair. You got to let this guy be himself, because this is the future of the franchise. So not that you want a loose cannon or anything, but I don't think Jazz is that. I think Jazz is himself. And as long as you're being yourself and you're not a disruption to anybody else, you're fine. So I think outside of a couple guys, Miggy being a main one, I think that they're okay and they're united. But I think if there's anybody that has a true problem, it could have probably been handled amongst that small group of people rather than the entire team, and create this huge distraction where Mattingly's coming out saying, yeah, I think it distracted them. They're going to come out flat and everything else. Cooper's laughing it off like, what the hell is this? I don't even know what the hell this is. It was a waste of time. So I think it could have been handled amongst that smaller group of people and not the entire team. But they swept the series. I think they're moving on, and I think that's what we can say about it.
Yeah, Alex, a couple of things. First, I'm relatively new to having media access at ballparks. I feel like having the suits in there during a players-only meeting is a very strange thing that never happens. I mean, how weird is that for Kim Ng to be in there? And then the second thing was, like you said, some people may think that he's undisciplined, but honestly, if it works, it works. And I'm an old school guy who wants players to follow the team rules and everyone is on the same page. But honestly, I'm at the point where Jazz has really been one of the only players on offense who has consistently produced this year. So he can honestly, to me, do whatever he wants at this point, as long as he keeps producing. I mean, it's not like the team is full of talented guys. We're like, oh, we can replace Jazz with someone who follows the rules. Like, you really can't. He's one of the only guys who's producing.
And a question for everyone. When was the last time would you say the Marlins had a player as marketable as Jazz, where you could put him on mainstream media, put him on there, you could put, good marketing, you could sell jerseys? When was the last time the Marlins had this kind of player?
I would say never. I would say never.
I think Stan on the ESPN body issue, Stanton and Jose were pretty marketable. I think those are the last time.
Yeah, Stanton, yeah, and Jose, yeah. But I mean, honestly, I don't think the Marlins have ever had this big of a personality ever in the clubhouse. Jose, probably very close, yes. But this guy, man, there were days, and I don't want to talk bad about Jose, but there were days where Jose was, he has a bad start and he's pissed off, right? Like we all remember that. He gives an interview in the clubhouse and he's short. But Jazz, he can go 0 for 4 and he's still going to be Jazz. So, what I mean to say is that this guy's always happy. He's always upbeat. I honestly can't see anybody having a problem with this guy because of how outwardly cool he is. Like, he just seems like a cool, laid-back guy. And, like, he said himself that he doesn't care. He knows failure is part of baseball. We all know that. He knows that as a player. He could go 0 for 4 in a day, but as long as he's having fun on the field, that's all that matters to him. So I honestly don't really see how anybody would have a huge problem with this guy just because of how full of life he is, how much he's always smiling, how much he's always willing to engage with fans no matter what. So I really don't honestly see how anybody – obviously we don't know everything, but this guy is a personality and he is such a likable guy. Whether he's hitting 250, 260, 300, 350, it doesn't matter. He's so likable. And I honestly – I've said this to you guys before. Obviously it doesn't apply to pitchers as much as his position players, but I think this is going to be the first time in a while that you see a Marlins player get voted into an All-Star game by fans. And there's something to be said for that because it doesn't happen a lot.
I feel like, can I say something? I feel like the Marlins should market him as much as possible. There should be billboards in Miami right now with his face on it because he's probably he reminds me of Ken Griffey Jr. with his personality because he's so he's excited, he's happy, he enjoys the game, and he makes you want to watch him. And I feel like that's something special that the Marlins need to really go all out with.
And this is the kind of market that would love that because admittedly there are some markets where they just want you to play the right way. Don't show up with blue hair. But Miami is one of the few markets in the country where absolutely, yeah, people, if you put him on a billboard and you marketed his wacky personality, I think people would eat that up down here.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, Alex, that you mentioned before about how about how the veterans feel about him, it's also weird because, and again, we don't know everything. He might have just been saying stuff, but Richard Blyer was in an Athletic article a few days ago, and he even said, I have his quote right here. Here's part of his quote. He said, he always says hi. He's very respectful to us veterans, and he doesn't think he's better than anybody. So Richard Blyer, speaking on behalf of the veterans, seems to think that everything was cool as of 5 days ago.
The only thing I'll say about that, and that's a great quote, and it kind of defends the point that I made before about how can you dislike this guy. I really do think that. But the other side of it is this, is that we're not there all the time. We hear what we hear. We report what we report to everybody else, those of us that go to games and those of us that are connected. All of us, not just anybody that's on here, but other people as well, Craig included. We just report what we hear. You're not going to hear everything. So maybe something happened and there was a moment of conflict, and that's definitely possible, right? Thankfully, it didn't get to Monte Harrison levels or anything like that. That's the good part, right? But the other part is, this guy knows he's good. He does, and he's friends with Acuna. He's kind of part of that kind of crop. I would say kind of maybe a step down a little bit from Ronald Acuna in terms of being brash. This guy seems a little bit more humble, but I mean, without breaking into his full personality profile, it just seems like a happy dude and like a guy that I'd want to be around as a baseball player, a person, teammate. And we've been around him, and he's a joy to be around and a great guy. So, like I said, I honestly don't see how anybody could. When it came out that it was Jazz, I'm like, wow. I mean, other than him being good and maybe somebody being jealous that he's good, that's really the only thing I can point to and say that would be the issue. But that's on the player that has the problem, not Jazz himself. So honestly, I hope they move past it. I think they will. Going on and sweeping a series, Jazz hitting 2 bombs. Just put a nail in it. It's over. Let's get past it.
As much I do want to get past it, I think we need to point out that there are some things Jazz does that are not selfish, but can be self-absorbed. The way that every single night, if he does anything good in a game, he rushes to Twitter and rushes to Instagram right after the game, win or lose, to share his highlights. That is not a typical, normal veteran baseball thing to do at all by anybody else, kind of aside from him on this Marlins team. For a guy that gets as much exposure as he does, so much of it, he seems to focus on himself instead of drawing his teammates into it in terms of his media appearances and again, this is like outside the clubhouse stuff. And you would think that his teammates know him better internally and don't really care, shouldn't really be concerned about the way that he presents himself outwardly. But that is something that makes him different, I'll say. So if you're wondering about things that he does differently than a traditional ball player and why traditional players on this team may have an issue with it, I think it's that approach that he at least takes when he's projecting himself outward, that so much of it is just about him and instead of the Marlins as a collective group.
I think that'll go away as he grows with the game, honestly, Eli. And I think you're right. I honestly think that he does do that. Like, if there's a tweet about him, he's going to retweet it. But I think he just wants to be connected with those that are speaking about him and with the fan base as well. So I think that's definitely something that he does that not maybe every baseball player does, like you said, especially a Major League Baseball player. But I don't have a problem with that. Hey, you did it on the field. You deserve the recognition, and he should be able to call himself out. So I really don't have a problem with that. I don't really think that anybody would blame him for taking credit for his success. But I don't think he shies away from failure either. Like I said, I think there were press conferences that we had in years past where people would ask him, hey, what were you thinking here? And it was not a good moment. And he's owned up to it. So I think it's both sides. I think he's an accountable player, but he should be able to take credit for his success because why not? So, yeah, I don't have an issue with that. I think as he gets older, maybe after he signs his first big contract, stuff like that will probably go away. So, yeah, I think he's okay for that.
Well, speaking of that contract, I feel like the Marlins should really start considering talking about an extension of him in a year or so. The more his salary starts rising with arbitration, because that's the kind of player they need to lock up like they did with Alcantara.
Yeah.
They should have considered that, I think, entering this year. You could see the tools even when the overall production wasn't all that special by the end of last year. Like, that was the time to buy really efficiently on him. I think it is. They do still have that window for sure between now and next year. At that point, though, if he continues to get a little bit better every year, then that window shrinks. So there does need to be some urgency if they are going to get that done.
You guys like to know, and this is another topic that we could probably get to on another show, but you guys like to know how I play devil's advocate, especially on stuff like this with projectable middle infielders that the Marlins have coming up as well. If he gets better, we can talk about the Hall at another time.
I wanted to ask you guys, you just mentioned about Jazz, his a potential contract extension and whatnot. What number would it look like for Jazz? Like, are we talking somewhere where how Sandy got? Is it close to triple digits? Just what is a figuratively contract for Jazz? What would something like that look like?
I actually think I think I can answer this one. It would be sort of in between the Ozzie and the Acuna contract. Yeah.
I was thinking the same exact thing, actually.
Maybe somewhere between, maybe closer to Ozzie, or I don't know. I'm not in the industry.
Well, I don't think those holds up because both of those in the moment felt like absolute robbery by the Braves. Like, those were below market value, even all things considered for those teams. It is difficult. I think entering the season, you were looking at like an Ozzie number where you could get it as free agent years at like $10-11 million. But at this point, that has changed quite a bit. Yeah, it's an interesting question exactly what that deal would look like. He has, even after this year, another 4 years of club control to go. And so the deal would have to be, to make sense for the Marlins, they'd want to add at least 2 additional years, you would think, on that, talking like a 6-year deal, buying up multiple free agent years. You're going to get pretty close to $100 million at this point, if looking forward. But it depends on what the player wants and what the team wants and all that. It would be more than Sandy. So I'll say that it would be a bigger commitment than him.
I'd say 6 years, $100 million. Just offer that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like Neil said, there's years left, like you said, Eli. But the longer you wait, the price only goes up. Especially with the more he plays and the better that he gets, you're only looking at more money. So is now, well, maybe not right now is the right time with everything that just went on with meeting and crap talk and everything else. But soon, I think you got to start looking at it if you realistically want to get it done in the market that the Marlins are in. I definitely think and we know how much money they just laid out too for Avi, Soler, Sandy. Like, we can go down the line. They just spent money. Doesn't seem like they spent a fortune, but they just spent money, a lot of money for a small market team. So how do you commit that money and when do you do it? I think it's got to be pretty soon if you want to get Jazz done.
Yeah, Kevin just brought up the Brian Hayes deal. That was 8 and $70. But this would be more because he's now already done more offensively. I think at least he's shown more game power than Brian Hayes has, and he does it. I think all things considered, that's the absolute floor, 70 million. I think it would be even more than that.
Yeah, but Hayes had that incredible start to his big league career where he was just going off. He didn't, like you said, he didn't show as much power, but he looked really good at the first. He slowed down a little bit with injuries and stuff. So.
Yeah. I want to talk about now on the field, mentioning everything off the field. I think it's a great time to change the topic and talk about one of the hottest hitters in the Marlins right now. And who else but Mr. Intentional Talk, Garrett Cooper. Just what have you guys seen from Garrett Cooper as of late? I believe he's hitting over 400 in the month of June, inching his way closer to potentially being on an all-star spot, maybe, but who knows. But what do you guys see from Garrett Cooper, and could he continue this on the rest of the year? We'll start with Alex Kirchhoff.
He doesn't want to answer that.
Oh, can you hear me?
Wait, can you say one more time? You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, Garrett Cooper.
Garrett Cooper. He has been. I think he's one of the most fun players to watch when he's on. I had high expectations for him this year. It is a little weird. I had him. I forget exactly what number I gave you guys in the preseason or pre-opening day live stream, but I think it was like 30, 35. He's obviously not going to reach that number for home runs. But it is weird though, because you look at his metrics on Baseball Savant, and he's in the top percentile. He's close to the top percentile in barrel rate, in exit velocity, and so you look at his peripherals, and it seems like he should be hitting more home runs, but it's a lot of singles and some doubles here and there. But he's still hitting, and he's still getting the job done. So I think that he's on right now, and when he's on, he's one of the more fun sluggers to watch on the Marlins.
Yeah, well, we went into the season sort of, the question was asked, who's the best pure hitter on the team? And I think, a lot of us did answer Garrett Cooper. And to me, it's still by far. I kept arguing with some people in the press box, like, who would you rather have up right now, Jazz or Cooper? I 100% would rather Cooper in a lot of these situations. And he's just outperforming all of his expectations, maybe minus the power, like Alex mentioned. But I have, he's the best hitter on the Marlins for sure.
Yeah, the one thing to point at and say it's not sustainable and then he's going to come back down is his BABIP is out of this world ridiculous, over 400. So I think that comes down. I think he comes down a little bit more to the player that we've come to know him as, more this 280 hitter, thereabouts, rather than over 300. He's also not walking. He really never has really walked that well. But last year he did. He brought it up to 12%, and now this year he's at 7% again. So he's still striking out, he's still swinging at a lot of pitches, and then the BABIP is out of this world crazy. So I think he's coming down. He's going to have a little bit of a come down, but for the time being, I think you guys are right. This guy's the best hitter on the team right now in terms of being able to get on base as often as he does. So it's encouraging. I just hope he stays healthy, and I hope he keeps it up. But I think there's a little bit of a come down coming pretty soon for him.
He just refuses to pull the ball these days. Everything is either up the middle or it's the opposite way. And so that's the type of approach that, for one, allows you to overachieve when it comes to balls in play. If you're going to be very unpredictable in that sense, I think if you look at his history, he's been a guy that's consistently been well above 300 in terms of BABIP, even though this year is kind of an extreme example of it. It has been bizarre how much he has sacrificed both the walks and the home run power in order to do this. And you add it all together, and it does seem to be the right decision. If he is going to hit everything on a line drive across all fields, that is more valuable. But it is a way different profile than I think we could have thought. In fact, it's crazy that he has 4 home runs for somebody that I think he's right there with Soler. He's maybe a tick behind Soler and Avi in terms of raw power, but he's right up there. He's hit some of the longest home runs of this team over the last several years. I remember the one against DeGrom that he hit in 2020.
Yes.
That was like 460 something up to the upper deck in left center field. And he's even stronger now. You guys have seen him in person this year. Like, he is as buff as he's ever been. And yet he doesn't even lean into it all the way. It's just been a really fascinating season, and one that really surprisingly is going to have him in all-star conversations if he continues to have the success just for a few more weeks. It's been awesome.
Well, we talk about the first base depth with guys that they need to get up, or guys that we would like to see come up with Lewin, Gerard, guys like that. And then you talk about Aggie also in the picture. And then we're talking about, we would have liked to see one of them go in the offseason. Obviously that didn't happen. And now, we got a logjam a little bit here. So we've talked about this before about, deadline comes around. I would think one of them is going to go. And if Cooper keeps this up, I think this is the best value you would get for him. So I know I always bring up the trade conversation, but I think it's a good one to bring up here. If Cooper keeps it up, you could get probably more than he's ever been worth probably in his Marlins career to trade him at the deadline. So I think that's another aspect of this. And then you got first baseman waiting. So yeah, he's been doing really well. It would be tough to see, the best hitter, as we just talked about, go off of the team, but I don't think they'd miss him very, very much, especially if one of those guys I talked about comes up and does well from what they're doing in the minors. So that's another conversation probably for a couple weeks from now, but something to keep in mind.
This is a great stat by Noah that I just want to point out. And I looked it up on Baseball Savant that 4 home runs for Cooper, 11 expected home runs if he played all his games at Minute Maid. I need to look and see which of those balls fell short. That is fascinating. How different the ballparks play compared to obviously Lone Depot.
Yeah, Neil, what do you are looking at from Coop, and is this something that he can maintain for the rest of the year?
I think with him, the biggest question is his health. I always thought he was talented enough where he could just all of a sudden have a big year. He has the talent, has the power, has been talked about. The problem with him has always been health. I feel like if he can stay healthy, his BABIP is going to come down, as we already said, and he's not going to be this hot the whole year, but I could still see him as a, let's say, 28 home run guy, 300 average. I don't think that's out of the question. It's just about health for him, really. That's what I think.
Yeah, and, there's another spot, he keeps interchanging himself between first base and DH, and that's Jesus Aguilar. Maybe not having his best of years, having a salary of about 7.5, easy tradable. Just what do you guys see from Aggie? Is that someone that the Marlins can look at when the trade deadline approaches? Is he someone that the Marlins could move?
Out of all the first basemen, that is part of that logjam, he is the one that I would want to move the most, just in terms of performance combined with age. I would like to see more of Lewin Diaz at the big league level. I'm sure we all would. My only question would be, realistically, what do you guys think Aguilar, with the money that he's owed and with his performance and with his age, what do you think we could get?
Yeah, not much. Not much. You would not get much. That's why I said, if you're going for a return, it would be Cooper that you would look at and say, okay, you would get a much, much better return out of Garrett Cooper with how he's performing. And if you think that this is the best he's going to be, we've talked about this with other players, but I think this is probably the best we're going to see Cooper this year. If he keeps it going up until the deadline, that would be great. But like we just talked about, that BABIP's going to come down. I really, really can't believe that he will keep up a 406 BABIP despite his location, despite the fact that he's not trying to force power anymore, as Eli just talked about. But honestly, it's going to come down. Nobody maintains that. And this is not the player that he's been for the whole entirety of his career. So what he's doing right now is probably the best that you're going to get and the best value you're going to get. And I think you could get decent players out of him if you traded him, especially if he makes the All-Star team somehow. Aguilar, Alex, you would look at his StatCast metrics. They're all blue, every single one. He's still owed money. So it would be very little. You would just be clearing a spot. So, and they do need to clear a spot. So I wouldn't be against it, but you would get back very little.
Right, and I think that's the point. That's why it would make absolutely no sense, in my opinion, to trade Cooper, because that's the consensus is he's the best hitter on this team. They would miss him a lot. I disagreed with you there, Alex. I think they would miss him an insane amount. He's the one guy in that lineup. Okay, he'll put the ball in play if he has to. He'll move the guy from second to third if he has to. He's by far the best pure hitter on this team. So you're right. Trading Aguilar would not be about the return, which is fine. You're doing that for a Lewin or a Gerard come up. You're keeping your best hitter on the team. To me, that's a slam dunk option. Is if you can get something for Aguilar, great, because it's, like I said, it's an easy decision for me.
Yeah, and with that, we're going to go into a loop break. After the break, we're going to be talking about the lineups, getting into this Houston Astros series and the Big Ten matchup between Eddie Cabrera and Justin Verlander. Stay tuned.
Why bother with empty shelves at retail stores, waiting 3 days for a break to fill, or driving across town to find out your hobby shop closed at 4 when you always have a card show in your pocket? With Loop, you can instantly buy cards, packs, boxes, or into auctions with the click of a button, and do it all while chatting with some of the best personalities and the best community in the hobby. Download the Loop app now on iOS or Android. Loop, a card show in your pocket.
So we are here today to talk about the Houston Astros series versus the Miami Marlins. Miami's trip to Houston for the first time in a long time. This looks like to be an incredible series going up against seemingly the best team in the AL, not named the New York Yankees. Let's go to Neil. Just what do you expect from Miami in this series, going up against the Astros? And they almost have to, just line up with Altuve and Yordan Alvarez. Just so many guys to just hit the ball out of the park. And what do you see Miami can do to try to stop these Astros?
Well, I want to see how the bullpen does. I feel like the bullpen, all the guys, Anthony Bender is going to come back at some point. By the way, I just wanted to mention he had a 97.1, I believe, last I checked, mile per hour fastball. And, well, Tanner Scott right now, his strikeout and walk percentage, that's amazing. Like, his ERA needs to be a lot lower. His FIP is 3.06. I want to see the bullpen. I want to see if Tanner Scott can continue being as good as he's been lately. I want to see Dylan Flora get some strikeouts finally. I want to see if, Cole Sulser improves. I want to see how the bullpen does. I feel like if the bullpen pitches the way they should be pitching, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But it's all going to be about pitching, really. And I really want to see how Edward Cabrera does against Verlander, because that's going to be a really big test. I really want to see how he does, because there's a lot of promise, a lot of hope. I just want to see these guys really, really show it, really do it. This series is really going to show how the pitchers can be. I really feel like that's a really big test, especially on the road. So that's going to be something that I think is going to be very important in this series.
Yeah, do we have the lineups for this series? If we could put them up really quick. Yeah, just really big lineups looking at just the Astros, Altuve, Michael Brantley, who's seemingly been in the MLB for almost like 20 years now, Yordan Alvarez. And from Yordan, here's a quote from Kevin. Kevin begged me to say this, so I'll say it for him. Yordan Alvarez is a literal machine and will not be stopped in this series. And I have to agree with Kevin. 17 home runs, almost 300 batting average. So, Isaac, what do you see from this Houston Astros lineup and really stands out to you trying to face these Astros?
A bunch of phenomenal names, man. Just wow. This is the first time in a little bit because Miami's been sort of facing not like the best teams. Are coming off Washington. Now they're facing, probably the top three team in the American League. And you just look at those names: Altuve, Brantley, Bregman, Alvarez, Tucker. You got 4 or 5 All-Stars probably for this season. And I think all of them have been All-Stars aside from Pena. So it's gonna be a really good test, like you guys said. So it's going to be tough for Edwards. It's going to be tough for Pablo tonight in that hitter-friendly ballpark. Mm-hmm. I'm really excited to see these names, though. Because like you said, Miami hasn't been in Houston since, I think, 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah.
Well, this team is intriguing for sure. The Astros team, of course, you look at those names, and, of course, they jump off the table or jump out at you, really. We know Altuve was injured for a little while. Yordan Alvarez, of course, come on and been really good. But as a team – this team is a worse hitting team than the Marlins. They're hitting 235 as a team somehow.
That's batting average. Come on.
It's batting average. So what they have done well, to Eli's point, what they have done well is they have done well to hit to their environment, and they have hit for a ton of power, and they have a 405 slugging percentage. So that's what they do well, and I think they do it probably better than any team in the league. So it's a really good team. It's going to be a test for sure. And it's going to be up to this Marlins offense, I think, to keep up with these, especially against these pitchers, because they've gotten really good pitching as well. So, yeah, it's intriguing to me that they only hit what they hit for average, but they put balls out. So, I mean, that's the strength of this team. Got to keep them in the park. Houston's not very easy. See if the Marlins pitching staff can do it, and then see if the offense can hold court.
As Kevin points out, the NLDS in 2020 was at Minute Maid, as you guys probably remember. There was a neutral site against the Braves where the Marlins got swept. What was on my mind about this series? I think just a simple statement, and I don't know. I think a lot of people understand this, but this Astros team is easily the best team that the Marlins have played this season. It's not just like the second best in the American League.
100%.
I think there's a pretty clear top 4 in baseball right now with the Yankees and the Astros and the Mets and the Dodgers. And as we've noted, for whatever reason, the Marlins have still not played the Mets at all this year. And they've not played the Dodgers yet. That's, I think, right after the All-Star break. And they don't play the Yankees. And I think the best teams they've played this year have been the Padres, who are pretty good. And the Brewers, who, as it turns out, are not quite as good as we thought they were coming into the year. This is like a new level, and it's such a stark contrast from the Nationals, not just on the hitting side, but on the defensive side. Like this Astros team is arguably the best defensive team fielding wise in baseball. There's a reason why their pitching staff, it's Justin Verlander and then some other pretty good guys, but they rely a lot on their defense, and their defense is awesome, especially the kid that is filling in for Correa, Jeremy Pena. Like Jeremy Pena is like plugged in there and
He
instantly
was their top prospect.
in a elite defender at almost all these positions. It's average or better defensively. I mean, everybody loves Martin Maldonado as being like the Jacob Stallings type, where he does all the little things well, and perhaps maybe he does the little things even better than Stallings does. And they just get by at all these positions, even with older players like Michael Brantley and Yuli Gurriel. Like they put them in spots where their age doesn't really drag them down very much. This is a complete team, and this is a scary team. And we'll see if any of you have the balls to pick the Marlins to win the series, because I certainly don't.
What do you think it's going to be?
Eli with the foreshadowing there. Neil, just what do you think about this Astros pitching staff? Because they're going to have to go up against Framber Valdez, Justin Verlander, and I believe Luis Garcia.
Luis Garcia.
So, what do you think about these starting pitchers for the Astros that the Marlins have to face?
I mean, there's not much to say. I mean, Verlander especially has been phenomenal. He's 39 years old. He missed basically like 2 seasons, and the way he's pitching now, I mean, Luis Garcia, I'm not as high on him, to be honest, but I like Christian Javier more. He's not pitching in this series. I feel like he's very underrated. I'm actually glad he's not pitching. I mean, honestly, besides Verlander, I really feel like the starting pitchers for Houston, as good as they are, I'm not really as worried as much about them, except for Verlander. I'm more worried about, again, I mentioned the bullpen in the beginning. I'm worried about the bullpen blowing it for the Marlins. That's why I really want them to step up. I really want to see how they improve, because I feel like they're up for an improvement already, because they're much better than they're currently pitching. But yeah, as far as starting pitchers go, I'm only really worried about Verlander. I don't know, Garcia, he's good. I don't know. I just feel like he's not. I feel like he gets a little bit overrated. Last time I checked, he wasn't there. He didn't have very impressive advanced metrics. So, like, I'm not saying that he's not as good as he is. I'm just saying that I'm not as worried about him as I would be about Verlander, or, like I said, Javier, who I feel is underrated, or even McCullers, who's not even pitching. Who knows when he's coming back? So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and how would you guys look at this Astros bullpen? Because I'm looking at it right now. You have guys like Ryan Presley, Hector Neris, just different, guys, capable guys, and also, Marlins legend Ryan Stanek, also in the bullpen for the Astros. So how would you compare this bullpen to the Marlins? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it just much greater? Eli, how would you describe these two bullpens going up against each other?
Well, it's just a lot easier. It shows the difference that context makes for a bullpen, where the Astros are just playing with so many leads, and they're playing with such good defense behind them that, like, even when they struggle, you don't really notice it as much, or they have enough other aspects of the roster to make up for the few games where they're bad. It's not a super special bullpen, but at least they've had decent continuity in the closer's role with Ryan Presley. Rafael Montero has kind of been a big surprise for them. He's a guy that was more or less a failed top prospect for the Mets. They tried to make him a starter a bunch of years ago, and even now, like, his underlying stats aren't quite as overwhelming, but he's become a pretty surprisingly big part of their team as well. And people were wondering exactly what direction the whole Astros pitching staff would go in now that Brent Strom, who was their pitching coach through all these glory years, is now with the D-backs. And I think that's been a big storyline, that they've been able to still tweak the pitch mixes and the approaches, all these guys, to get the very best out of them. It's not like a super intimidating bullpen. So I will say that much. Like, if there's one series for once, where the Marlins might actually like mount one of those rare comebacks in the later innings. Like it's doable against this team. The problem is you just worry about being down by too much because everything else can make up for kind of the limitations of their pen.
Oh, another thing, I don't know if you guys noticed, Braxton Garrett is starting the second game tomorrow for the Marlins.
Yeah, I'm not super optimistic about that, but we'll see. They're in a situation. I guess I should at least touch on the injury updates today that we got from Jordan McPherson right before the game. Nothing super surprising here.
Still at 35 miles per hour. Is that still?
Yeah, that was in a separate tweet. The actual main stuff with Brian Anderson. After speaking with a spine specialist, still no timeline for him even to return to baseball activities. So you're talking about a number of weeks, even in a best case scenario, to get him back. Anthony Bender, as Neil mentioned a little while ago, at least he's about to throw a bullpen. Oh, he did throw a bullpen yesterday. So that's a good sign for a reliever. Like he could be conceivably back by the next homestand, something like that. But the big issue is Luzardo and Poteet still not even throwing, especially Luzardo with how long he's already been down.
Right.
And it's looking really concerning with Luzardo. I don't know if the team's being straightforward with what's going on there. The fact that he's
right. We were saying when he got hurt or when he went down, we were thinking, okay, it's just precaution forearm strain, right? I think that's what the diagnosis was when he went down, was a forearm strain. Am I right?
Yeah.
You know me in injury history. I may be wrong, Eli, but I think they said it was forearm strain, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
so and I told you guys at the time that I didn't like that diagnosis, and here it is all these weeks later. We're talking about what, at least a couple months now, right? Like
it's been almost 1 month. Almost
one
full month.
I figured it was longer. But man, yeah, the fact that he's still not even throwing, that's very, very concerning, especially with how hard that guy throws. I don't like that prognosis whatsoever, especially, man, they had a lot riding on him this year. I really hope that he gets back as soon as possible, but not throwing, we may not see him until when? Probably July, August, maybe, if it comes down to that. So this is tough.
Kevin cracking me up with the injury stuff. For Neil, who might not be aware, we had something regarding Edward Cabrera and his injury diagnosis.
Yeah, it's not worth talking about.
We turned it into a trivia question. So again, the connection to this series obviously is Braxton Garrett is in the rotation for the near future, not just this start. I think even if he gets blown up in this start, he probably takes the next turn, because the other options on the 40-man roster are Daniel Castano, and Jordan Holloway is still not stretched out yet to even be a starting candidate. Even if you'd want him in that position, you'd have to really start looking at guys that are outside the 40-man roster. Brian Hoeing. Who else do we like to? Oh, of course, Max Meyer, if he gets fully healthy. He's supposed to take a big step towards his return at extended spring training this weekend, but it's unclear exactly how stretched out he is. That's still probably a few weeks away from being a realistic option. Oh, and tonight, of course, I think our viewership is way down for this episode because everybody is watching Eliezer Hernandez pitching for AAA Jacksonville, making his first start since getting sent out. So that was a mistake by me to do to go head to head with that important programming, because I'm sure everybody is preoccupied with that. I'm not giving up on Eliezer entirely. I do think we'll see him in the majors again this year, but from what we saw this year, so far this year, there was not a whole lot of reason to be encouraged about that. It's not a deep rotation right now. One guy we didn't touch on was Trevor Rogers pitching last night. He was all right last night, but it was nothing special against a pretty weak competition. Like there's just not. It's a lot of question marks once you get past Sandy and Pablo.
And guess what? Eliezer Hernandez tonight gave up a home run so far in his first 2 innings at LA Jacksonville.
The only other triple, like you said, Brian Hoeing, his trip to his promotion to AAA has not gone well. He has an ERA over 5, so I don't think you'll be seeing him right now. And then past him, there's literally nobody else. So like you said, I think this is Braxton's full shot, because he's really never got a full chance to start. He really hasn't. He's been the guy that's gone up and down and filled space. So I think this is his real chance. So this is definitely the biggest test of his career coming up tomorrow night, as Neil was mentioning. So I'll be interested to see how he does. The Astros are slightly worse against lefties than they are against righties, so maybe that'll play to Braxton's strengths, but see how he does. I'm intrigued by that. I'm going to be intrigued to watch him and how he does tomorrow night.
this also serves as a reminder that you never have enough starting pitching. For all those people saying you can trade Pablo, trade Elliott, you can never have enough starting pitching, and that's showing right now for this team.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to go a little bit and talk about talk about the farm system a little bit. And now with Eddie Cabrera graduating, moving up to the top 30 is MD Johnson.
Right.
Alex Carver, what are your thoughts on that? MD Johnson being a top 30 prospect.
That guy is one of my favorite prospects in the organization. Started with Jupiter, and he was the wildest guy in the world. Like, just couldn't from pitch to pitch. He would throw a really good pitch and then wouldn't be able to find the strike zone. And his walk rate was ridiculous. It was out of this world crazy. And then he got promoted, and with Beloit, he really started to figure it out. So yeah, it's been a guy that's just done a ton in a short amount of time. And to go from basically a nobody prospect that I didn't think was ever going to do anything whatsoever, not even bullpen, to turn his control completely around was amazing. I mean, me and Danny DeVivo were calling him Wild Thing at one time. Like he's a crazy guy, and the fact that he was able to turn it around is a testament to him. And he deserves that spot in the top 30 on Pipeline. So I'm proud of him. He's fun to watch pitch right now. He's got 3 good pitches, so why not? Yeah, definitely back end starter ceiling. Probably more of a future bullpen guy, but definitely cool to see him make something of himself because it wasn't always like that.
Well, I was not expecting that take. So I've seen some great games that he's pitched this year. I was surprised that they put him into the top 30. Paul McIntosh is still not in their top 30 on Pipeline. I don't know if you knew that.
Maybe top 5.
So
yeah, I know.
I'm not a super big fan of the way that Pipeline organizes the bottom of this list. He has performed, MD Johnson, but he's almost 25 years old and he's still pitching at high A. And he's kind of repeating high A. He spent a lot of there last year, so I will be more intrigued once he gets moved up. I guess if you want to be generous, you could compare it to an Antonio Velez situation where he was shoving at high A and then he moved up to double A, and that's when it kind of got irrefutable that he was a pretty interesting guy. For the moment, I'm not super intrigued, but of course we defer to Alex on these really deep dives.
No, stop it. You're right. MD Johnson versus Paul McIntosh. I would like to see it be Paul McIntosh, higher level. He's been amazing. You're right, but it's deserved. I mean, like I said, this guy basically. I mean, the slider has become probably his best pitch. I think is the slider. Velocity is okay. I don't think it's fantastic. I think it's okay. But the fact that he figured out his control is great. And I think they see a high floor. I think they see a bullpen floor, and that's why he's at that back end. Whereas PMAC, they may want to see a little bit more. Maybe that's my only guess. But I haven't been somebody that's always agreed with Pipeline. I've told you guys that. You guys all know that. I don't always agree with them. That's why we all have an opinion. We're allowed to disagree. I definitely disagree that I think PMAC and maybe a couple of other guys should be there over MD. But MD has performed, like you said. So it's okay. And for back end top 30, I'm all for it.
Yeah, another player I wanted to mention about is just Yuri Perez and what you guys are seeing from him. I believe he didn't get his last start because it was rained out. But just what's the diagnosis or prognosis on Yuri this season? A lot of hype of him to be the future ace starter, face of the franchise for the Miami Marlins. And what are you guys seeing from Yuri this season? Is he just doing what predictions are doing? Is he playing well enough? Just what are you guys seeing from Yuri so far?
Well, I know he was able to throw 2 innings in that last start that you're referring to, or 3 innings, I think.
Yeah.
And before it got rained out. He's looked good. From the velocity was there. I was watching that game while in the press box for a little bit. He's pumping 98, 97. I know Fish on the Farm, some Twitter account, was putting up some nice highlights. He's looked great, and he's just so young at such a tough level of minor leagues. He's been as advertised. His first couple starts in AA, if I remember correctly, he was just getting adjusted, but he's looked great.
He has very clearly distinguished himself, in my opinion, as their number 1 prospect in the organization. That's another place where Pipeline is a little suspect. I think they still have him number 4 in the Marlins system, which I don't think is defensible. What he's done really since those first couple starts, he's been awesome. The only thing that can slow him down is the rain, as it did his past outing. That's about it. He's awesome. He just needs to stay healthy because he's a pretty complete pitcher at a size that we rarely see, with a body control that we rarely see at that size. He's been as good as advertised, and that bold prediction that Isaac made at the start of the season about him sneaking up to the majors by the end of the year, you can't totally rule that out if he keeps it up. But this has been anybody. If you look around and somebody doesn't consider him like one of the absolute best overall pitching prospects in baseball, then they're just not paying attention. He's been that special.
That's why I really do hope that that this team stays somewhat relevant into post the All-Star break, because you get Luzardo back, like Eli mentioned. Maybe you have Yuri in September. That's a really fun rotation. Edward, Pablo, Sandy, and then those two guys to finish 4 and 5. It could be really fun if this team just like stay afloat a little while longer. Then they have a big stretch of games against sub 500 teams like the Pirates. They have a lot of games against them. I'm really rooting for them to just, like I said, stay afloat for this really rough stretch of baseball for sure.
The only thing that guy has not done, because he hasn't been allowed to do it, and we're probably won't see this year, maybe late in the year, hopefully. But the Wahoos have said that they're still taking it easy. They're not going to let him do it yet. The only thing we haven't seen him do yet is go past. Well, he went past the 5th inning once, and that's only because his pitch kind of loud because he was that good. So he's only gone above 80 pitches, I think, once, So that's the only question he hasn't answered is that third time through the lineup, back end innings, back third of innings being the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. That's the only question that prospect has not answered. He's answered every other question. He's gotten better as he's gone up, answered questions that I had of him early on in terms of repeatability. Control of his body is so good. Like that guy, watching him pitch, it's hard. It's easy to forget that this guy's 6'8", at such a young age. It really is because of how fluid he is. And like Eli said, if you don't have this guy, forget the Marlins. If you don't have this guy, I would say top 25, top 30 in all of baseball, you're not doing it right because he's that good. So, yeah, I just want to see that back end of games and see if he can keep the velo up, see if he can keep his control, keep control of his body later in games. Hopefully we see that end of this year. We will see it next year as long as he's healthy. So, yeah, really intrigued. Just the main thing I worry about is his health because he's got so many moving parts. But with how fluid he is, I think he's going to be all right. And I think he's going to be really special.
He's actually able to go 5 innings or more. He actually went 6 innings a couple starts ago. He's able to go 5 innings or more.
First time. I think that's first time in his career that he's done that. So, and they've said they have him on this pitch count. I think it's 75, 80 pitches that they're keeping him at, which is okay. He's still very young, but you get excited about it. You see what he's doing, being able to go 6 innings on 80, 85 pitches. That's amazing. He could probably easily right now throw a complete game and be and he would be fine. But they're taking it easy, which you can understand. But man, I want to see it. So we'll see it soon, though. Hopefully.
Only 80 pitches 3 times so far this season.
Yeah, and with that is our favorite time of the live stream, is prediction time, predicting the Marlins series against the Houston Astros. And here are the prediction updated standings. Eli, Kevin, myself, Alex, Noah, and all the way at the bottom. Still in single digits is Isaac. Eli just dominating with 21 points. I don't know how he got the Anthony Bass one. That was something else. And now starting with predictions, I want to start with Isaac. Your series prediction and MVP.
And I'm supposed to use strategy to sort of leapfrog some of these guys in the standings, but I guess I'll go first. Hopefully no one copies. You know what? I know no one's going to take, and I do honestly think there's an outside chance that this does happen. Miami wins 2 out of 3. I think tonight they have to win, obviously. And Pablo, he's pitched in this ballpark before. He threw 6 innings. He gave up just 2 home runs to the Braves in 2020 in the division series. So he's got some history in the ballpark, albeit not against the Astros, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, optimistic thinking, 2 out of 3. And the MVP will be Jeezy. Let's go with Jesus Sanchez for the MVP. They don't face a left-hander, correct? No, it's Verlander, Luis, and who else?
What is Framber? I always forget whether
Framber's a lefty, yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe, you know what? Let's still stick. He hits a couple home runs tonight.
Let's do Alex Carver. You mentioned that you're always last. Let's put you at second. Let's see. For your
I went second last time. It didn't work out, so I guess I got to go for redemption. Man, I would love to agree with Isaac, but I can't do it. This team's really good. It's one of the best teams in baseball. We all know that. I do think that the Marlins are competitive, and that's something that we can say that it's good. I don't think they're going to get blown out in any games. I think that all these games will be pretty close. But I'll say they win 1 of 3. Unfortunately, and they just get beat out at the end. I mean, this team's gotten production, like I said earlier, from everywhere. They've gotten production from everybody in their lineup. Yordan Alvarez is going crazy. Altuve's back and healthy, and he's been doing really good. Bregman hasn't clicked on yet, but I mean, that could happen at any time. I mean, he's hitting like 220, but that could happen at any time that guy clicks on and starts doing well. So 3rd spot in the lineup too, still for them. So obviously the confidence in him is still there. So I think the Astros have it. They're clearly the better team here. Marlins have some question marks around them. Even after last series, they got the sweep, but it is the Nationals, and then everything happening around them with the media attention. So yeah, 1 of 3. And I got to pick an MVP. Why not? This guy's been amazing. Yordan Alvarez, MVP. There you go. Easy answer.
All right, let's go back to back with Alex's and Alex Krutchuk. Your series prediction and MVP.
So I'm also going to go 2 out of 3. In some of the most basic metrics, runs allowed and runs scored, the Astros are surprisingly even with Miami, even though, the Astros are better than Miami in terms of roster construction. But the Astros are number 2 in earned runs allowed per game, while Miami's number 10. Houston has actually scored less runs per game than Miami, which is something that Alex Carver mentioned earlier in the live stream. So I do think that they match up well enough to where Miami could pull out 2 of 3. For MVP, I'm going to shout out Noah Berger with the stat that he gave earlier tonight with if Cooper would have had 11 home runs this year if he played every game at Minute Maid Park. So I'm going to go with him. He's been hot lately, and now that he's at a more hitters-friendly ballpark than Marlins Park, I think he'll be good.
You scared me there for a little bit when you mentioned Noah. I thought you were going to pick De La Cruz as your MVP, but go with Garrett Cooper. Eli, your series prediction and MVP.
The Marlins are getting swept in this series. I would be surprised if they win a game. I think this is where it turns ugly again for this team. It's such a big adjustment going from the Nats to going to this team. And if they had Sandy starting a game in this series, the way that I look at it, if they had Sandy and Pablo starting 2 out of 3 games in every series, then this season could get turned around. Of course, that is not physically possible for people to do. And I don't think in this first game, Pablo will be quite dominant enough to carry them to the win. And the next 2, I think, could be fairly lopsided losses as well. The little things that work in the Astros' favor, even more so than being at home. They are coming off an off day as well. The Marlins did not come off an off day. They had to fly in and all that stuff. So this Astros bullpen that we picked apart a little bit, at least are really well rested, all their high leverage relievers. In fact, I think one of those high leverage relievers is going to be my MVP. It's going to be old friend Ryan Stanek. He's going to pitch, if not once, maybe twice. I think he could pitch twice in this series, throw a couple shutdown innings, and at least be in the positive. So it's a conservative pick. I think he'll be slightly in the positive. And if he is, when none of the other usual suspects are, then maybe I steal some MVP points as I have before with other relievers.
If he becomes MVP, then I'm going to call Rob Manfred or someone, because you had Eric Gonzalez before and he got MVP. And if he gets it, then I don't know. You must have a source in there that we don't know of. Neil, so for this, your prediction is going to be your series MVP and who is going to win the series?
Well, I wanted to just go with Astros because I feel like they'll probably win. But you know what? I'm thinking right now the Marlins are hot. I know it's Washington, but in baseball, there is a factor of, small sample sizes, luck. And you know what? The Marlins are hotter than the Astros right now. So I'm going to say tonight it's going to be close. But Pablo Lopez is going to get the job done. The Marlins win. Tomorrow, Braxton Garrett's going to be bad. The Astros are going to blow it up. They're going to win by a large margin. But then game 3, Edward Cabrera is going to go toe-to-toe with Verlander. It's going to be close. And then my MVP is going to win the game for the Marlins after already having a good series. And that's going to be Garrett Cooper, because that stat about those 11 home runs that really got me thinking, I think he's going to have a big series, and I'm picking him for the MVP.
That's a good one. And really quick, Kevin had to text me his prediction. He has Marlins take 1 of 3, and his MVP is going to be Yordan Alvarez. But
and I also need to read
Kevin.
Noah's prediction. Noah was for the Astros to win 2 out of 3, and he has Garrett Cooper as his MVP as well.
I think mine's going to be a little different.
No video?
Oh, yeah, at the bottom.
No, he didn't send a full video. He sent just a 2-line text message this time.
For me, it's really simple. I have the Astros winning 2 games. I think the Marlins, the only chance of winning is tonight with Pablo. Braxton's a different story. And then Eddie and Verlander, I think Verlander might have the edge, and especially hitting-wise for the Astros. So I have 2 out of 3 Astros winning. And my MVP, I'm going to go with someone different. I'm going to go with Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker, really great player. I think there was a stat mentioned that him and Jazz were the only guys this season with 10-plus homers and 10-plus steals. I thought that was a really great stat. I think Kyle Tucker is going to show out for the Astros in this series. But that does it for us in predictions. Us for Fish Straps Live. For Isaac, for Alex, for Eli, for Neil, I'm Daniel. This has been Fish Stripes Live, and always go fish.
Why bother with empty shelves at retail stores, waiting 3 days for a break to fill, or driving across town to find out your hobby shop closed at 4 when you always have a card show in your pocket? With Loop, you can instantly buy cards, packs, boxes, or into auctions with the click of a button, and do it all while chatting with some of the best personalities and the best community in the hobby. Download the Loop app now on iOS or Android. Loop, a card show in your pocket.